Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Chaf Vav Amar Beis, 26b of Maseches Megillah, and we're starting from the bottom of the page, 2 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rebbe. Rav Papi said in the name of Rebbe, and some change it to Rava, in the name of Rava. What did he say? Mi bekenista lebe Rabbanan shari. If you want to transform a beis knesses, a beis a shul, into a bei rabbanan, into a beis medrash, a study hall, shari, that's permitted. But mi bei rabbanan, le beis if you want to convert a beis medrash, where you learn Torah, into a beis knesses, where you daven, asir, that is forbidden. That's what Rav Papi said in the name of Rava. V'Rav Papa mishmei de Rava masni yipcha. But Rav Papa, as opposed to Rav Papi, said in the name of Rava the opposite, that you're allowed to turn a beis medrash into a shul, but you can't turn a shul into a beis medrash. Amar Rav Acha said, Kavasei de Rav Papi mistabra, that Rav Papi's version is more mistabra, is more logical. De Amar, actually, mistabra usually means logical. In this case, it just means it seems more correct. De Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because we have a statement from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that Beis HaKnesses mutter la'asoso Beis HaMedrash, that a shul is allowed to be converted into a Beis Medrash. Shma mina, so we can learn from there that that's the correct understanding. Since that we have Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi on record as saying, so that is more authoritative, and therefore, that is the version of Rava that we accept, that you're allowed to convert a shul into a beis medrash, but not a beis medrash into a shul. Continues the Gemara, Darish Bar Kapara. Bar Kapara taught, Mai dichsiv. What is the meaning of the pasuk, or what is to be derived from the pasuk, that says regarding Nebuzradan, the general of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king who destroyed the Beis HaMikdash? It says, regarding the Nebuzradan, Vayisraf es Beis Hashem, and he burnt the house of Hashem, Ves Beis HaMelech, and the house of the king, Ves Kol Bate Yerushalayim, and all the houses of Jerusalem, Ves Kol Beis Gadol Saraf B'Eishim, every Beis Gadol, large house, he burnt in fire. So what are each of these types of houses being identified? So the first one, Beis Hashem, is the Beis HaMikdash. The house of God, that's the Beis HaMikdash, that's the temple. He burnt that. Beis HaMelech, it says he burnt the house of the king. Elu Paltarin Shel Melech, that's the palace of the king. And then it said, Ves Kol Bate Yerushalayim, all the houses of Yerushalayim, Kimashman, as it sounds, the houses of the dwellers, of the residents of Yerushalayim. And what does it mean, Ves Kol Beis Gadol Saraf B'Eishim, every large house? What large house is it? We're not referring to the houses people live in. We already said that. So what is that referring to? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It's a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. What is referred to? What this is referring to? What is Beis Gadol? Chad amar makom shemegadlin bo Torah. One said, it's being described as Beis Gadol. Is it a description of the size of the house? It's a large house? Or it's a house where you are megadel, where you raise? So the first opinion says, both opinions are going to actually accept that second idea. But the first opinion, what are you raising? What are you growing? So the first opinion says, Makom shemegadlin bo Torah. It's a place where you increase in Torah. Meaning it's a beis medrash. V'chad amar makom shemegadlin bo tefillah. One says it's a place where you increase in tefillah. In prayer, it's referring to a shul. Now, what is a source for referring to either Torah or tefillah with this type of terminology of migadel, to grow, to increase, and to call it a beis gadol? So Manda Amar Torah, the one who says it's referring to a place of Torah d'chsiv, because the pasuk says, in Yeshaya, it says, Hashem chafetz leman tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. Hashem desires for his righteousness that what? That Yagdil Torah v'yadir. That Torah should be Yagdil, should increase. V'yadir, and it should be strengthened. So we describe Torah as being Yagdil, as growing, as increasing. And so the base Gadol, the big house, the increasing house that is referenced in the pasuk refers to a house of Torah. That was one opinion. Uman de Amar Tefillah, and the opinion that says that it refers to a place of Tefillah, prayer, Dechsiv, because the verse says in Melachim Beis, it says, Sapra, Sapra Nawi, Eskla Gadol Asher Asa Elisha. Tell me all the great things that Elisha did, so it refers to the things that Elisha, the miracles that Elisha brought about as Gidolos, the great ones. Now, how did Elisha bring about those miracles? Says the Gemara, Elisha da'avad, birachamihu da'avad. How did Elisha bring about miracles? Through prayer, through tefillah, through requesting mercy. So, and those are described as Gidolos. So the actions of Elisha, meaning the tefillos of Elisha, are described as Gidolos, even though in a certain sense it refers to the results, the miracles that he brought about, but it's what he actually did was tefillah, was prayer, and that's referred to as Gidolos. So we see that that the word Gadol, Gadel, base Gadol, is used in the context, or Megadolin, we grow, we increase, is used in the context of tefillah. So the Gemara had that it's a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, which it refers to. Does it refer to a house of tefillah, a house of prayer, a shul, or does it refer to a house of learning, a base medrash? Now the Gemara didn't know who had said what, and now the Gemara says, Tistayim Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi hu damar makom shemegadlin bo Torah. We can prove that it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi who's the one who interpreted the pasuk, the word base gadol, a big house, to refer to a house in which they increase in Torah. Dam Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because we have on record Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi saying, Beis HaKnesses mutter la'asoso beis hamedrash, that a shul is allowed to be turned into a beis medrash, that a beis medrash is greater than a shul, in his view, and so it would make sense, therefore, that when he refers to a great house, a beis gadol, then he's referring to the greatest kind of house, which is the beis medrash, and therefore it makes sense that he's the one, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is the one who interpreted the pasuk to refer to a beis medrash, and Rabbi Yochanan is the one who interpreted it to refer to a beis knesses. Shema Minah says the Gemara, indeed, we can learn it from here, who said what. Okay, now the Gemara returns to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah had said that if you sell a Torah, you are not allowed to buy Sfarim with the money. You can't buy books of the Nevi'im, of the prophets. So, ask the Gemara, Ibayilahu. The Gemara said that the students had a question. Mahu limkar sefer Torah yashan likach bo chadash. What is the halacha with regards to selling a Sefer Torah that's old in order to buy a new one? Are you allowed to sell an old Torah in order to buy a new one? So actually when I taught the Mishnah, I think I may have said that the Mishnah says you cannot sell something and buy something less holy, and it talks about selling things and buying things that are more holy. What about selling something and buying something equally holy? So I had said that I think that yeah, you could, because you have to go up in holiness and you can't go down, but you can also go even. But it's actually not so simple, and that's the Gemara's question. Are you allowed to sell a Torah that's old in order to buy a new one? So, do we say, Kivan de lo mali le aser? Do we say that since you're not going up in holiness, it's forbidden? O Dilma, or maybe you'll say, Kivan de leko le eluye, iluya achrina shapir dami. Maybe you'll say that since there's no way to go higher, so then it's fine. It sounds like, by the way, that for the things mentioned in the Mishnah of lesser holiness, there's no question you have to go up in holiness, because you can. And if you can, then you should. And so when you sell something of lesser holiness, you should always buy something of greater holiness. But by a Sefer Torah, there's nothing greater in holiness. So you can't go up. So are you allowed to sell a Torah that's old, that's past its time, in order to buy, at least I guess for you it's past its time, whoever wants to buy it may think it's still usable, but can you sell a Torah in order to buy another Sefer Torah? So, says the Gemara Tashma, come and listen and let's try to prove it from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Aval machru Torah, that if you sold a Torah, lo yikchu svarim, don't buy svarim, don't buy books of the prophets. Which sounds like it's saying svarim hudelo, that you can't buy svarim, you can't buy neviim, ha-Torah, b'Torah, shat b'dami, but it sounds like you could buy another Torah. Otherwise it should have said, don't buy another Torah. So, the Gemara says, no, masnisin diavad. No, the Mishnah is talking about after the fact. If you sold the Torah, obviously at this point, what choice do you have? You have to buy another Torah. So there it says, if you already sold a Torah, don't buy Nevi'im, and the implication is, but do buy another Torah. But kikami bailan, but our question is, lichatchila, from the outset, are you allowed to do this? Are you allowed to sell the Torah in the first place with the intention of just buying another Torah? Or must you hold on to a Torah forever? So, says the Gemara Tashma, come and listen. Golin Sefer Torah b'matbechos chumashim. So, the Brisa says that you're allowed to wrap a Sefer Torah using the wrappings of chumashim. Chumashim, like we said last time, a chumash, we think of a chumash as a printed book, but they didn't have printed books. A chumash in the time of the Gemara is a scroll that's only one of the 5 books of Moses, one of the 5 books of the Torah. So it's a book of Bereshis, or it's a book of Shmos, or Vayikra. So it's one, that's called a chumash from the word chamesh, from a fifth. It's 1/5. So if you had a scroll of a chumash, of Bereshis, let's say, and you had something that you used to wrap it, so you're allowed to elevate the holiness of that wrapping, of that covering, and use it to cover a Torah. V'chumashim b'matbechos neviim, and you can cover a chumash, a scroll of the Torah, of a single section of the Torah, with a covering from a scroll of Navi, uksuvim, and of the writings. But you cannot use a cover of a chumash to cover a scroll of Navi or ksuvim. And you can't use a covering of a Torah to cover a chumash. Now, says the Gemara, Ketani miyas, but in the meanwhile, what did we learn here? It says, Golem Sefer Torah matbechos chumashim, that you can wrap a Torah in the covering of a chumash, which implies matbechos chumashim and matbechos Sefer Torah lo, that you can wrap a Torah in the cover of a Navi, but you can't wrap it in the cover of another Torah, which would also imply, you can't go across, right? You can't go even. You can't cover a Torah with a covering of a Torah, and you can't cover and therefore you also shouldn't be able to sell a Torah to buy another Torah. So the Gemara says, Ema Sefer, but hold on. Let's look at the end of that brisa. It says, V'lo chumashim matbechos Sefer Torah. Right, as we read, it says you cannot cover a chumash with the covering of a Torah. The implication there is ha-Torah b'Torah shaper dami, that you could cover it with a covering of a Torah. It says don't cover a chumash with the covering of a Torah, implying but a Torah you could cover with the cover of another Torah. So says the Gemara, you can't derive anything from this brisa regarding our question of whether you can sell a Torah to buy another Torah. So Tashma, so come and listen to another attempted proof. The brisa says, Menichin sefer Torah al gabe Torah. You're allowed to place one Torah on top of another Torah. V'Torah al gabe Chumashing. You're allowed to put a Torah on top of Chumashing, of, again, individual scrolls of Chumash. V'Chumashing al gabe Nevi'im. Ksuvim, and you could put a Chumash scroll on top of a Navi scroll, or a Ksuvim scroll. Aval lo Nevi'im Ksuvim al gabe Chumashing. But you cannot put scrolls of Nevi'im and Ksuvim, of the prophets and the writings, on top of a Chumash of Torah. V'lo Chumashing al gabe Torah. You can't put a Chumash on top of another Torah. So, what do we see though? That you're allowed to put one Torah on top of another Torah, which would imply that that these are of equal value, and just like you could put one Torah on top of another Torah, you can sell a Torah in order to buy another Torah. So the Gemara says you can't prove anything from there. Hanacha ka'amarta. You're trying to prove from placing one on top of the other that you can sell one to buy another one. Shani hanacha delo efshar. No, the placement of a Torah on top of another one, it's impossible not to. In what way? Because if you're not allowed to place one Torah on top of another, well, every individual Torah has Torah placed on top of another. Meaning what? How can you roll up a Torah? When you roll a Torah, you have one page sitting on top of another page. So if you weren't allowed to place Torah on top of Torah, it would be impossible. You have to have all your Torahs rolled out forever and remain rolled out, and that's not possible. So since there's no other way, we permit it. We permit for Torah to be on top of Torah. Just like you can roll a Torah and have pages on top of each other, so you can place one Torah on top of another. But you cannot prove from there anything with regards to selling one Torah in order to buy another Torah. So Tashma, so come and listen to another attempted proof. To Amar Rabba bar Bechana Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi bar Bechana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Lo Yimkar Adam Sefer Torah Yashan Likach Bo Chadash. A person shouldn't sell an old Torah in order to buy a new one. So that seems to answer our question. That was our question, right? Can you sell an old Torah to buy a new one? So we have Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel on record saying that you may not. Says the Gemara, it's not our proof. Hasa Mishum Pshiusa. There we're concerned about negligence. Ki kamrinan, but when we have our question, kasiv umanach lifruke. We're talking about where it's written and it's ready to be redeemed, it's ready to be bought. In other words, when Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said you cannot sell a Torah to buy a new one, that's where the new one isn't written yet. And you're selling one Torah in order to commission the writing of a new Torah. There we're worried that you'll be negligent and you'll never come to write the new Torah with that money, and then you'll have sold a Torah and not used the money for another Torah. That's for sure a problem. But our question is, where the second Torah is already written, the Sofer wrote the Torah, he's looking for a buyer. So can you sell one Torah in order to buy an existing Torah where we're not worried about negligence, that you'll never come to replace it? So that was our question. And that you can't prove anything from the statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, because he was talking about where there wasn't another Torah waiting in the wings. So Tashma, so come and listen. Dam Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Meir, Ein mochrin sefer Torah ela lilmod Torah. You're only allowed to sell a Torah in order to learn Torah. V'lisa isha, and to marry a woman. So Shema, we know we can learn from here. Torah b'Torah, shaper dami. That one Torah for another is good. In other words, if we seem to be equating, or we allow you to sell a Torah to learn Torah, so Torah for Torah seems to be fine. So just like we allow you to sell a Torah to learn Torah, you should be allowed to sell a Torah to buy another Torah. Torah for Torah. Says the Gemara, no. Dilma shani limud, shani limud mevi lidei ma'isa. No, we said you can sell a Torah in order to be able to learn. Again, that actually, to describe the case, as Rashi says, is where a person needs money, a person wants to be able to learn Torah, they can't afford it, and And so they have a Sefer Torah, so they sell it in order to support themselves to learn Torah. That's okay. But maybe, says the Gemara, specifically in order to learn Torah, it's okay, because Talmud is so great, learning is so great, because it leads one to action. But, and Ishanami, and even to marry a woman, to sell a Torah in order to be able to marry, go tov ra l'shavas yitzara. That the world wasn't created for to be uninhabited. We need marriage in the world. That's essential to the continuation of the world. So maybe for that you can sell a Torah. Aval Torah b'Torah lo. But to sell a Torah, to buy another Torah, who says? It's not for the purpose of supporting one's learning of Torah. So who says you can sell a Torah to buy another Torah? So finally we have a brayso as follows. Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught. A person should not sell a Torah even if they don't need it. Yes, or okay, and furthermore, even if a person doesn't have anything to eat, Sefer Torah, and he sold a Sefer Torah in order to support himself, again, nothing to do with learning, just he needs food. Oh, Bito, or he sells his daughter. He's not going to see signs of blessing forever. That says Rav Shimon Gamliel that even if a person needs food, but to sell a Sefer Torah for that, and to sell one's daughter for that, they won't see blessing come from that. Now that's quite a statement. A person needs food; they can't sell a Sefer Torah. Rav Shimon Gamliel says they shouldn't. So if they shouldn't sell a Torah even to be able to provide for themselves, then it would seem that this is very discouraged, and they shouldn't sell a Torah in order to buy another Torah. That seems to be the conclusion, although the Gemara doesn't state that explicitly. Okay. Now the Mishnah said, "V'chein b'mosrei." It said that when you sell one thing, you always have to buy something holier, even with leftover money. In other words, let's say, for example, person sold the coverings of Torahs, and then he bought an Aron Kodesh, which is higher in holiness. But let's say you have leftover money. So the Mishnah said you can't just use it forever you want. The leftover money also has to go up in holiness. So ask the Gemara, or says the Gemara, Amar Rava said, Lo shanu el shemachru v'hosiru. That's only where they sold something that had Kedusha, that had holiness, and there's leftover money. So that leftover money has to be elevated. Aval gavu v'hosir, but if they're just collecting money to buy something, let's say they wanted to build a shul, or buy a Sefer Torah. So they're collecting money for that purpose, but they didn't end up needing it all, so they have leftover money, so then they can use that money for whatever they want. When you have an item that's already holy, and then you sell it, so you transfer that holiness to the money, then all the money has to be used to be elevated for holiness. But if you just collect money in order to do something, and you don't end up using that money, so the leftover money is free to do whatever you want with it. Even though you collected it for the purpose of something holy, you don't have to go up in holiness anymore. Okay, so Esvei Abaye, but Abaye asked a contradiction on this from a brayso. The brayso says, regarding our Mishnah, it says, Bamed Dvar Mamurim. When is it true that you cannot use the leftover money for whatever you want? The brayso says, that's Shelo Hisnu. That's only if they didn't make a Tanai, make a condition. Aval Hisnu, or if they made a condition, Afilu Duchsusya Motor. You can even use the money on Duchsusya. The Gemara is going to ask what Duchsusya is, but it's some mundane purpose. And Abaye quotes a brayso that says that we say that if there's leftover money, you cannot use it, or you can't go down in holiness. That's only if they didn't make a condition. But if they made a condition, so then you can use it even for something as mundane as Duchsusya. Now ask Abaye, hey Chidami, what case are we talking about where you have leftover money? Is this talking about where you sold an item and have leftover money, or where you collected money and have leftover money? So ilay Moshe machru v'osir, if we're talking about where you sold an item of holiness and you have leftover money, so ki hisnu mai havi, what condition would make a difference? You sold something that has holiness, the holiness transferred to the money, so the money is holy and it has to be used for an elevated purpose. What kind of condition could you set that would make a difference? Ela shegavu v'osiro, rather the case must be where they collected money and they have leftover money. And that's where we say if you made a tanai, if you made a condition, so then you can use the leftover money for whatever you want. What was the condition? The condition would be, I'm collecting this money on condition that it's needed. Then, meaning, I'm collecting this money for some holy purpose on condition that it's needed for that. But if not, then I should be allowed to use it for something else. But you have to stipulate that. So Taima de Hisnu says Abaye, the reason why you can use the money for whatever you want is because you made that stipulation. Halo Hisnu lo. But it sounds like if you didn't stipulate that, then you cannot use it for whatever you want. So Rava had said that the whole idea of not using leftover money is only if you sold an item of Kedusha, but if you're collecting money, you can use the leftover money. Abai says, hold on a second. The implication of the Brisa is that even in the case where you collect, it's only where you stipulate in advance that if there's leftover money, you'll use it for whatever you want. Then you can use it for whatever you want. But if you don't make such a stipulation, then you can't. So that's a question on Rava. So Rava will respond, well, he'll say no. No, the Brisa could still be talking about the case where you sold an item of Kedusha and you have leftover money. But this is what the Brisa is saying. When is it true that you can't, when you sell a holy item and there's leftover money, you cannot use it for whatever you want, rather you have to use it for elevated holiness? That shalo hisnu shiva tuve ha'ir b'mamanan she'ha'ir. That's where the 7 council members of the city did not stipulate in front of the man of the city. Aval hisnu shiva tuve ha'ir b'mamanan she'ha'ir. But if the 7 council members of the city were masna, they stipulated before in the presence of an assembly of the people of the city, so then even for a duchsusya, something as mundane as duchsusya, which we still have to explain what that is, would be permitted. In other words, Rava's response is that when the Brisa uses the terminology of shelo hisnu, that they didn't stipulate, it's not like Abaye understood it that it means you have to make a condition in advance in order to be able to use the money for whatever you want, but rather it's referring to the stipulation, the dictation of the council people of the city. That when is it true that you cannot use the money for whatever you want, even the leftover money? That's if it wasn't under the sale wasn't under the auspices of the council people of the city. But we already said in the last week's Amud that if the council members of the city sell something, so then they have that power to just release it from its holiness. So if it was hisnu and shiva tu yair, if the council people of the city, the leaders of the city, stipulated this sale, arranged this sale, agreed to this sale, so then you can use the money for whatever you want. Now, first wide line, Amar le Abaye lahu mirabanan. Abaye said to one of the students, Dava Mesader Masisa Kameder of Sheshis, who would arrange the teachings of Rav Sheshis, meaning a student of Rav Sheshis. He asked him, Mishmiya lecha me Rav Sheshis mai duchsosya. Abaye asked him, did you hear by any chance from Rav Sheshis the meaning of the word duchsosya? Amar le, so he said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Sheshis, so says Rav Sheshis, Parsha de Masa. It means the horseman of the city, the messenger boy. That's what it is. So the expression that we were saying before was, if you make a tanai, if you make a condition, or if it was stipulated by the men of the council people of the city, so then you can use the money from the sale of something holy, even for duchsasya, even for sending a messenger boy on missions, or buying him a horse or something. Amar Abaye said, Hilkach, therefore, Haitura mirabaran deshama le milsa v'lo yada pirusha. If a Torah student would hear something, a word that he doesn't understand the meaning of it, he should ask it before people who spend time around the sages. Because it's almost impossible that they haven't heard it at some point from great people that they hang around. So Abaye takes a practical lesson from this episode where he asked this student of Rav Sheshes the meaning of the word Duchsusya. Abaye says, whenever you have a question about a word, you should ask it of the students who hang around the great sages, because, of course, at some point they would have heard the explanation of each of these more difficult words, which I guess had fallen out of use in their time. Okay, we will resume from here next time.